Hello, everyone. We will get started in just a moment. We're still waiting on a couple of review committee members. I apologize for the delay. We've had some issues with this new platform. Okay. Make sure that the recording has started, and I will go ahead and start the meeting, and hopefully the other members will join us. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 91st meeting of the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Review Committee. My name is Melanie O'Brien, and I am the designated federal official to the Review Committee. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded. The recording, transcripts, and meeting minutes will be made publicly available after this meeting and will include the names of all those in attendance today. If you object to this, you may disconnect at this time. This is a public meeting of a federal advisory committee established by the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, NAGPRA, of 1990, and this meeting is held under the Federal Advisory Committee Act, or FACA, and its implementing regulations. This meeting was noticed in the Federal Register on September 11th, 2025. An agenda for this meeting and materials are posted to the NAGPRA program events page. The Secretary of the Interior issued a charter for the Review Committee, which governs its objectives and scope of activities. The purpose of the Review Committee is to monitor and review the inventory and identification process and repatriation activities under Sections 5, 6, and 7 of the Act. The Review Committee is also responsible for reporting to Congress on the progress and any barriers encountered in carrying out its responsibilities. FACA requires that advisory committee membership be fairly balanced in terms of points of view represented and the functions to be performed. To achieve this, NAGPRA requires that the review committee be comprised of 7 members, 3 members nominated by Indian tribes, Native Hawaiian organizations, and traditional Native American religious leaders, with at least 2 such persons being traditional Indian religious leaders. 3 members are nominated by national museum organizations and scientific organizations, and 1 member is appointed from a list of persons developed and consented to by all of the other members. Members are appointed by the Secretary of the Interior and serve as advisors to the Secretary on NAGPRA issues. There's currently 1 vacancy on the committee following the end of the term of Armand Menthorn. We solicited nominations twice in 2024, and in February 2025, we received nominations which were forwarded to the Secretary of the Interior. To date, the Secretary has not made an appointment from those nominations. There is no quorum requirement for this committee. Despite having fewer than 7 members appointed, I have determined that this meeting can proceed. With that as an introduction, I'd like to start with a roll call of the members. If you could please answer out loud. Hali Aloha Ayau. Thank you. Michael Catches Enemy.
Here.
Dominique de Beaubien.
Here.
Monica Shaw.
Here.
Okay, and I see that Angela Garcia Lewis is here. I'm going to bring her in as a presenter. Angela, you should be able to turn on your video and unmute yourself now.
Great. Thank you. Here. I'm here.
Angela Garcia Lewis.
Here.
Thank you. And the final member is Toby Patrick. Let me just quickly look and make sure that I don't see Toby No, we will continue to try to reach out to Toby and bring him into the meeting, but it does not appear that he's present. I would also like to acknowledge the individuals who are assisting me with conducting this meeting today. We have two attorneys from the Department of the Interior Office of the Solicitor, Ilana Oser with the Division of Indian Affairs and Brady Blasco with the Division of Parks and Wildlife. From the National NAGPRA program, Lisa Koszalski is the review committee coordinator who is responsible for organizing this meeting and preparing minutes and transcripts of these proceedings. With that as introduction, I'll call this meeting to order. Mr. Chair, before we begin with our agenda for today's meeting, would you like to offer a traditional opening?
Yes.
I'm sorry, but before you begin, we're getting a little bit of feedback. Do you maybe have a speaker on?
I do.
Unfortunately, there's a major audio problem on your end. We hear you repeated over and over again.
This should be fine now.
Could you speak a little bit more just to be sure?
Now I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Thumbs up if I can proceed. Okay. Well, kako. Eki ko maulo eki mena kupuro mako. Ya aloha mai o ko ina mea I ko maka. E kala vale mai o ko I ko mako heva me ko mako haumia me ko mako ai ku me ko mako ai a me ko mako waha he a me ko mako ho hiki ino ana ya o ko. E nā mai o ko inaina me ko mako. E mali mai o ko. E hoora ia mako ina mea hawa I kupono. E ho ala ia mako kana au kono no ke ia ana. E ho o hui ia mako I ho o kahi mana o. O ko mana o ka mea polo nei a laila no. E holo mua mako I ka ikaika I ka haa ka mana o hui ka ole. A me ka ho mau popo o ki ia ana no. E ano mako ka o ko keiki mo upuna ke kahi. A noho mai. A pelano. A mama. Ua noa.
Thank you very much. Before we begin our first agenda item, I would like to note that the review committee is very interested in receiving comments from anyone in attendance today on the progress made and any barriers encountered in implementing NAGPRA. If you're interested in providing a public comment during this meeting, please let me know when I ask for public comment. At that time, you will be able to raise your hand to request time to make a public comment, or you may enter a public comment in the Q&A. The first item on our agenda today is a report from the National NAGPRA program. I will go ahead and proceed with that unless any members of the committee or the chair has any concerns with proceeding. Okay, I'll go ahead and begin our report then. As you are all well aware, NAGPRA recognizes the rights of lineal descendants, Indian tribes, and Native Hawaiian organizations in Native American human remains, funerary objects, sacred objects, and objects of cultural patrimony. To realize those rights, NAGPRA requires museums and federal agencies to take certain actions for Native American human remains and cultural items in a holding or collection or removed from federal or tribal lands. Administrative responsibilities under the Act are assigned to the Secretary of the Interior, who has delegated certain tasks to the National NAGPRA program. I would like to provide the committee with an update on our work at the National NAGPRA program since I last reported to you in June. My report today will summarize the program activities during the last federal fiscal year from October 2024 through today, September 30th, 2025. The program reports annually on its activities in our annual program report, all of which are available on our webpage. The report for fiscal year 2025 will be published on our website soon. The National NAGPRA program organizes its work and its annual reports according to the sections of the Act. My report today will focus on the sections of the Act the Review Committee is responsible for: inventories, summaries, and repatriation. What has been retitled in the revised regulations is Subpart C, Repatriation by Museums and Federal Agencies. Please note that all of the data that I'm reporting to you today is publicly available and is updated in real time through our public databases at us.gov/NAGPRA. Anyone can generate reports with the same data at any time. I ran these numbers this morning around 9 a.m. Eastern, so they don't reflect the work that's been done today. I can report to you today that there are a total of 80,473 Native American human remains that have been reported in inventories by museums and federal agencies, but are still pending consultation or public notice prior to repatriation. So that number again is 80,473. For cultural items, nearly 160,000 cultural items have been published in notices over the past 35 years. Mariah Soriano is the National NAGPRA Program Compliance Coordinator. Much of her work on inventories and summaries this fiscal year has related to updating and correcting data, including conducting audits of older data to ensure that this information that I'm presenting to you today is as accurate as possible. We continue to receive a record-breaking number of Federal Register notices. Since October 2024, we've received 908 notices for publication. Notice submissions average between 20 and 25 notices per week. We have published a total of 846 notices since October 1st. I cannot stress the significance of this number. Just 3 years ago, in 2022, we published 215 notices, and that was our second largest number ever published. This year, we published over 800. We continue to increase the number of notices published exponentially each year since 2022, and I do anticipate that this trend will continue for the next 5 years. The total for this year included 256 notices of intended repatriation for Native American cultural items and 505 notices of inventory completion for Native American human remains and associated funerary objects. In addition, 6 notices were a new type of notice, a notice of proposed transfer or reinterment, or what we call an NOT. Under the revised regulations, when no lineal descendant or cultural affiliation can be identified for human remains, a museum or federal agency may, at its discretion, agree to transfer or reinter, but first must publish an NOT. The remaining 79 notices published this year were notices of intended disposition from federal lands under Subpart B of the regulations. Lori Jennings is the National NAGPRA Program Documents Coordinator. She continues to manage this growing volume of incoming notices and ensure consistent publication by the Federal Register. The revised regulations now require a repatriation statement be submitted after publication of a notice in the Federal Register. We've completed data entry on these statements and are continuing to receive them on a daily basis. We've updated our public database for the Federal Register notices to record the date we received the statement. Altogether, we received 849 statements. That includes both repatriation and disposition statements. And while some of these were sent after the revised regulations were effective, most of these were sent after the revised regulations were effective in 2024, but we have also received statements for notices prior to 2024. Finally, we have a new document type under the revised regulations, museum statements of holdings or collection, which are required by 10.8C and D. We continue to receive and record museum statements as well as responses to museum statements by federal agencies. We completed our initial data entry on these museum statements earlier this year, and this month we released a new internal database module to begin capturing that data. We're still working on transitioning the data from our initial data entry into our database. But early next year, we hope to be able to add all of these museum statements to our public-facing databases. I want to take this opportunity to thank the newer members of the NAGPRA team, the National NAGPRA Program Fellows. They completed the bulk of the work on repatriation statements and museum statements and still continue to do that workload. Without their dedicated effort, we would not have been able to complete the data entry that we've achieved so far. Audrey Andrews, Tanner Barney, and Shayla Charlie have joined the National NAGPRA Program team for a 2-year fellowship and will be with us until next fall of 2026. They've moved on to some more exciting tasks than data entry at this point, but they continue to assist us with keeping up with new statements. This has been an enormous task and one that we were really not entirely prepared for. I'm indebted to each of the fellows for their assistance. Beginning in January 2024, the National NAGPRA program has hosted a series of monthly webinars. We continue to host those webinars over the course of this year and the third Friday of every month at 1 p.m. Eastern. Attendance at those sessions has continued to be robust, topping around 500 attendees at some sessions. During each webinar, we provided specific information on the NAGPRA regulations, but also allowed time for questions. Recordings of all of our webinars are available on our events page. We continue to receive a large volume of phone calls and emails requesting assistance with NAGPRA. Kate Compton-Gore has joined the program as a training coordinator for 3 years. She presented several webinars this year and will be presenting many more in the new year. In addition, Kate has been assisting with responding to requests for assistance and creating new resources and templates for museums, federal agencies, as well as Indian tribes and Native Hawaiian organizations. In fiscal year 2025, Congress appropriated $3.4 million for NAGPRA grants. The grant program supports 2 types of grants: project grants, which this year were increased to $150,000 for consultation and documentation projects, and repatriation grants, which are up to $25,000 for direct repatriation expenses. Consultation and documentation grant proposals were due at the end of March, and repatriation grant proposals were due on May 9th. Earlier this month, we notified recipients who received awards for fiscal year 25, although we did not issue a press release. In the coming weeks, we will be adding all of these grants to our webpage. As a reminder to the audience, limited funds are still available for repatriation grants until next May of 2026 or until the funds are expended. At the recommendation of the review committee and others, we have made funds for repatriation grants more available throughout the year. Angie Pearson continues to serve as our grants management specialist, although she's taken on additional responsibilities within the grants management division. We appreciate Angie's continued support of our program, despite taking on other duties. This concludes my report on the inventory, summary, and repatriation sections of the Act. However, I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee might have. Once again, I'd like to commend the staff of the National NAGPRA program and the Department of the Interior for their collective efforts, which has allowed the program to uphold its responsibilities.
Hi, Melanie. I have a quick question about grants.
Yes.
You mentioned that there is still some funding available. Do you have a
Mhm.
ballpark estimate of how much money is left over?
That's a great question. I do not have that in my brain at this moment. I think that we reserved enough for about 4 repatriation grants, so about $100,000.
Perfect. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the committee?
I had one, Melanie, this is Monica. You were talking about the databases that the interns have been working, or the fellows have been working on. And is that data available to the public, or is it just through contacting you directly to obtain data from that? those particular databases?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the data is publicly available. Data on inventories, summaries, notices. The data on museum statements is what we're still working on transitioning into a format that we can share publicly. But our hope would be that early next year, if you go to the database public website, there'll be an additional museum statements option. So that's our overall goal. If you're interested in the data at this point, you're welcome to request it. I will say that it's still a little unwieldy in that we're working to ensure some data integrity as we're moving it into our database system. That's really what the system will help us do. So we have a lot of data. Its utility is limited, I'd say right now, but there's a lot of museum statements out there. I will add the data on repatriation statements is publicly available. So in the notice database, you can find that under the heading statement date.
Melanie, you mentioned that there are still grant funds available,
Yes, that's correct.
and what are there deadlines for these? Or you said until they're expended?
Yeah, the deadline is May of 2026.
Oh, 26. Sorry, I wrote 25.
Yes, or until the funds are expended.
And that's both for repatriation and consultation,
No, it is only for repatriation.
only for repatriation.
That's correct.
Have all grant funds for FY 2024 and FY 2025 been formally awarded to museum, tribes, or Native organizations?
All of the funds for 2024 have been awarded. There's a small amount of money that we held back for repatriation grants from the 2025 money. As I said to Dominique, I think that's about $100,000, maybe a little bit less, to allow for any additional repatriation grant requests between now and May.
Related question regarding staff. How many staff were in the program on January 20th of this year?
On January 20th of 2025, we had 4 full-time staff, five full-time staff. I've got to count myself, sorry. David Barlin-Lyles, Mariah Soriano, Lori Jennings, David Tarler, and myself were the 5 full-time federal employees.
Oh, and how many are there today? I thought David retired.
So David did retire in May. So in January, we had 5, and today we have 4.
Okay, got it. When will you distribute the program report for 2025?
I hope to be able to post that to our website very soon.
Any idea when very soon is?
No.
What's the impact of the pending shutdown?
I can't say at this time.
Oh, yeah. Is there any updates that you can discuss on the allegation of failure to comply by Kauai Community College?
No, I have no updates on specific allegations.
Is it possible for the committee somehow to receive either updates or somehow have some sense of where these things are at so we know they're moving? Because that one's been a while, and it involved Evie that was being repatriated to another island, someone from another island, which was kind of urgent for us, and then we haven't heard anything.
I can consider ways that we might be able to provide more regular updates to the committee about the overall numbers of allegations that we've received, and this similar kind of data to what we report in our annual report. I could work to provide more regular updates to the committee on those statistics, but that would be the limit to what I could provide.
That's all my questions. If members, any further questions? I see someone has their hand up.
Yes, that's a member of the audience. I think we'll wait for public comments.
So with that, okay. Chair, as chair, I'm looking for a motion that the committee accept the program's oral report and request clarification on the matters, including updates on allegations of failure to comply, when the report will be distributed. Yeah, I move that we accept the program's oral report. Can I get a motion for that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second, Monica.
Second.
Discussion? Having heard none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Melanie, I think that was unanimous.
Yes, I believe that it was. Mr. Chair, we're not able to see you. I'm not sure if you
My
intended.
thing is saying unable to turn on my camera. Let me try again.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, I figured out the first issue is that I was on twice, and that's why it was double.
All right. Well, it looks like
No,
we solved that. We can hear you just fine, and now we can see you as well.
Okay. So I think that concludes the item one.
Yes. We can proceed then to public comment. For public comment, there are two options. You may create a discussion question in the Q&A, and I will read that along with your name to the committee, or you can raise your hand. It looks like we have one hand raised. Okay, go ahead and raise your hands, and I'll take you in the order that they show up here. I will allow camera and allow microphone for those that wish to speak. Elizabeth Weiss, you may unmute and turn on your camera if you wish.
Okay, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to ask the question. And I don't know, this might have been better written, but I'll go ahead and ask it anyway. One of the things I've noticed in some of the repatriation notices is that it seems that some of the objects that are either listed as cultural patrimony or funerary objects, that the definitions of what that could include have been blurred at the ends. And I'll give an example. There's one from Berkeley that talks about some baskets from the Kroger collection, and it defines those baskets as objects of cultural patrimony. And in the repatriation notice, it says, you know, that these baskets or these objects have an ongoing historic and tradition of cultural importance central to the Native American group. But it doesn't mention the second half of what needs to be considered for cultural patrimony. So just being of cultural and historic or traditional importance is not significant enough. What you also need for it to be cultural patrimony is that it cannot have been owned by an individual and therefore could not have been, lent or sold or conveyed by individual. And so I want to ask, how come that part of the cultural patrimony definition has been left off of this repatriation notice, and I believe off of others? Was I heard?
Yes, yes, you
I
were
don't know.
heard.
Sometimes my computer freezes. Sorry.
No, we heard you.
Okay.
I will respond by saying I think you're referring to the determination section of the notice, where there is a description of the number of objects of cultural patrimony, and includes the first part of the definition of objects of cultural patrimony. That definition is longer than what is in the public notice. And I will say that the public notice is truncated only to simplify the publication and publication costs. That does not reflect the decision that was made by the museum that the object meets the definition. I guess the notice, for better or worse, is a summary of the items and that they meet the definition. The determination that they meet the definition is made by the museum, and the notice publication is just a summary of that.
Okay, I have one other question and I thank you for that clarification. I do have one other question that also goes by in regards to these definitions. I've seen a lot of funerary objects listed that include things like coprolites, soil, botanical samples, and one of the part of the definition of a funerary object is that it was intentionally put in with the body before or after. And if there's no body, then it's unassociated, and if there's body, it's associated. But how is it being determined that some of these things that really are very much biological in nature, I cannot, I find it hard to grasp that coprolites, faunal coprolites, are intentionally put in with as a funerary object. Can that be clarified, please? How those decisions are made?
Again, I think I would point to the language in the notice under supplementary information, where it clarifies that the determinations in the notice are the sole responsibility of the museum or federal agency, and that there likely is additional information on that determination, but it's not a part of the public notice.
Okay. And one more thing, sorry about this. One more thing. I noticed that there was, and this was a notice of inventory completion, that for, I believe it's Berkeley, let me see if I'm right, UC Berkeley, and they list a funerary, one of the funerary objects as a plastic bird. Do you know what type of plastic there was, or plastic bird this was? It just seemed to stick out at me as kind of an oddity, and I was just wanted to know if anybody had more information about that object.
Again, the determinations in either type of notice are those of the museum or federal agency, and I will just reiterate again, the notice is a public summary of the decision by the museum or federal agency, and certainly there's an extensive amount of consultation that goes into the identification of objects, and the work that goes in before a notice is published is not necessarily reflected. So again, to more information, you would need to contact the museum or federal agency to get more information about those determinations.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I will disable and enable cameras and microphones. Just a moment. Sam, Luther, Sam, you are next in the list, and you should be able to unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you wish to.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Bonjour, Duke. I guess it's not so much a question, more some insight. I think you said something was $3 million in grants, NAGPRA grants, correct?
Yes, that $3.4 million.
Oh, 3.4, and then there's about 100K left to run us until May.
That's correct.
Okay, and so I guess since the last round of NAGPRA updates, has there been an increase or a decrease in how quick that grant money is getting spent? And is there kind of a pattern in the way some of these NAGPRA monies are getting spent? Is it seem to be making an impact? Are funds getting spent quicker? Or are we running into problems? And again, this just relates to the last round of NAGPRA updates.
Sure, I can address that question. Thank you for asking it. The National NAGPRA program since 1994 has always received more requests for funding than it is able to provide. That fluctuates over time, of course, depending on different circumstances, but we have always had more requests for funding than we've been able to award. That was the same over the last fiscal year. A change in the last fiscal year by increasing the amount of consultation and documentation grants from 100,000 to 150,000 did result in us awarding fewer grants. So we still had more than we could award, but there were even a smaller number because of the increase in the amount per grant that was possible. But in general, we are always able to expend all of the funds that we are appropriated for NAGPRA grants. In terms of their impact, I wouldn't be able to address that directly, although we do receive final reports on each grant. We do have a history of their impact. And actually something that we're hoping to work on in the future is to have a little bit more of a direct connection between the grants that have been awarded and notices that are published in the Federal Register, again, as an indicator of progress in NAGPRA. And we don't yet have that data available to us, but I would say that in general, every NAGPRA grant is used for a repatriation purpose, for a NAGPRA consultation, documentation, or for a physical transfer. And all of those result in a positive impact for repatriation.
Okay, perfect. I appreciate that answer, hey.
Thank you very much.
Miigwech.
Okay, Kay Matina, you should be able to unmute and turn on.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Awesome. Miigwech. Bonjour, kakinda and dajnakas, boriwadmi and dao, meng and dodem, yut mene payu aki and dochbia, wabin aki, gishpen, Massachusetts et dayan. Hello, I am Kay Kakinda Matina. I am a program associate for the Association on American Indian Affairs, the oldest national Native nonprofit, and we are providing these oral comments for the NAGPRA Review Committee and the National NAGPRA Program's consideration. The Association on American Indian Affairs has heard from Native nations, institutions, and the public about whether research and other information obtained from the control or possession of Native ancestors, their burial belongings, and other cultural items is required to be repatriated, along with the ancestors and cultural items. National NAGPRA program has been provided advice that repatriation of research and other information is not legally required by NAGPRA. This is a legal interpretation that staff at the National NAGPRA program are unable to make without the proper procedures. Moreover, this legal advice is causing the very harm that NAGPRA was meant to remedy. Federal agencies and the divisions within them are charged with the administering and interpreting the statutes and regulations they oversee. This authority comes from Congress, delegating power through enabling legislation, like it has with NAGPRA. The Department of the Interior, through the National NAGPRA program, has primary responsibility for implementing the law. But agencies do not have free rein. Their interpretations must remain consistent with the statute, the regulations, and the Administrative Procedures Act. Agency staff cannot make binding legal determinations on their own. Only the agency acting through proper authority, rulemaking, adjudication, or formal guidance, and with Native Nation consultation can do that. There are three major concepts within NAGPRA that make their advice wrong: right of possession, Native American traditional knowledge, and free, prior, and informed consent. The founding principle of NAGPRA is the definition of right of possession. An institution will only have a legal right to claim ownership of an item if the item was obtained with the voluntary consent of the group with authority to alienate it at the time of taking. Right of possession is the only exception to repatriation, and the institution must prove right of possession by a preponderance of evidence. If institutions have not had a right of possession in the cultural item, then the institution also lacks such a right to obtain any derivative information from those cultural items. Thus, the NAGPRA regulations support the repatriation of all information obtained from them. NAGPRA consistently centers Native Nation authority in defining and determining the nature of cultural items. Not only are institutions required to consult, but they must defer to Native American traditional knowledge to determine what constitutes a cultural item. Within many Native epistemologies, the physical item and the knowledge, spirit, or information it embodies are inseparable. For example, the DNA of a person is not merely data, it is the person. A photograph of a sacred object is not just an image, it carries the power and presence of the object itself. If institutions must defer to Native nations for what constitutes a cultural item, then the NAGPRA regulations support the repatriation of all information obtained from the cultural item. In addition to Native traditional knowledge, the duty of care provision offers additional support. The regulations require that institutions obtain the free, prior, and informed consent of Native nations before they can do any activity concerning the collection. Those activities include, and I quote, any exhibition of, access to, or research on human remains or cultural items. The provision defines research to include, but is not limited to, any study, analysis, examination, or other means of acquiring or preserving information about human remains or cultural items. This provision helps parties to understand the scope of activities that an institution does not have the right to do without consent, and includes anything that will preserve or analyze information about the cultural item. These research products are not independent items. They are direct extractions of cultural meaning, biological identity, and sacred context. A DNA sequence is the genetic essence of human remains. A photograph of sacred items captures and reproduces their sacred qualities. Field notes describing funerary associations replicate sacred knowledge. Because institutions never had right of possession, they cannot acquire lawful rights in the data derived from the items. To separate item from information is to reward unlawful possession and to perpetuate control over Indigenous cultures. It would be an absurd result to repatriate ancestors, yet allow a museum to retain the data, the DNA sequence, osteological report, and images that can constitute the very identity of the individual. This undermines the remedial purpose of NAGPRA. Courts avoid statutory interpretations that produce absurd or unjust outcomes, such as the National NAGPRA program's advice that research and information is not repatriatable. So, in conclusion, not only must all relevant information be shared with Native nations at their request, so too must all research projects be returned where Native American traditional knowledge supports that the information is derivative of the ancestors, belonging, or cultural items. Finally, the purpose of the law is to remedy human rights harms against Native peoples, and any ambiguity should be resolved in the favor of those peoples and their nations. The Association on American Indian Affairs can provide additional support to any Native nation that may be confronting the situation with an institution. We urge the National NAGPRA program to stop providing legal interpretations that are arbitrary or capricious, that ignore the full context of the law and the human rights work it was meant to support. We also want to remind Native nations, institutions, federal agencies, and our allies about the Association on American Indian Affairs 11th Annual Repatriation Conference, where will we stumbling over my words now at the end, where we will be providing training and sharing knowledge about NAGPRA, international repatriation, and other related subjects throughout the month of February. We will be posting more information on that soon to come on our website, so stay tuned. Iguian, heartfelt thanks for this time to share a word from the association. And I'm open to questions, but also I see lots of hands, so request.
Thank you, Kay. Holly Aloha, did you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Kay if the association has any specific proposals like regulatory language or statutory language or changes that they want to propose to the committee, and if not yet, if they would consider doing so.
Thank you so much for your question. Yeah, I'll definitely bring that back to the association so we can spend some time thinking about that, and we'll provide a written comment and email you all with that so we can spend some time chewing on it a bit. Miigwech.
Mahalo.
Thank you, Kay. We have another public comment hand raised. Rachel Overstreet, I am allowing your mic and camera.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you just fine. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Hanmatakiapi, Chante Washte Nape, Chuzapi, Rachel Overstreet, and Machiapi. Hello, my relatives. I greet you with a heartfelt handshake. My name is Rachel Overstreet. I work at the Friends Committee on National Legislation on our Native American Affairs portfolio. I just have one question that I think is a perennial question that folks have been asking about the report, which is the lack since 2017 of any pursued charges by DOJ related to, I think it's 118 violations. So they've all been declined since then. And I know that in the report, the committee discussed how there have been that has been an ongoing discussion, but we haven't seen any changes insofar as any change in terms of a stated plan to address why these charges are not being pursued, or a conversation with the DOJ or request for comment about why we've had since 2017 no pursued charges under 118. And then also, if you look at the graph in the report, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. We're seeing what seems to be a total lack of enforcement in terms of this issue. So wondering if there's an opportunity in really either the response to GAO, because I'm sure they'll be looking at it, or in the report to discuss why we've had this happen. And I know I'm sure a lot of people have thoughts and ideas about why this is happening, but would like to see the committee ask DOJ for comment or to have some kind of public explanation for why this is going on. Pilamaye.
Thank you, Rachel. At this time, I don't see any other hands raised. If you would like to provide a public comment, you are welcome to raise your hand. You can also provide a public comment in the Q&A.
I just wanted to make the comment that if there could be some kind of written response to the previous speaker, I think Rachel Overstreet's question, because I'm curious myself on why that's the case. Not only could National NAGPRA, your lawyers, present us
So
the response.
So Rachel's comment was related to your report to Congress, item number 7 regarding illegal trafficking in Native American human remains and cultural items. That is on page 20 of your report from last year. I haven't looked to see if it was included in the report for this year. I think Rachel's recommendation is that the committee ask for some clarification on the statistics that the committee provides in its report.
But she's asking the department the question on why it's taking this position. Doing us, it's you. That's the department.
Well, no, I'll clarify that criminal prosecution under NAGPRA is the purview of the Department of Justice.
Support from DOI would be helpful.
I can certainly work within Interior to see if we can make a request to the Department of Justice, but I would recommend that the committee consider including that in its report to Congress. Rachel is suggesting, I think, that the committee ask for information from the Department of Justice.
Yeah, I think we this is kind of a good segue into the GAO letter on the next agenda item. Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Certainly. Okay, again, this is the only opportunity for public comment. We just stress again that this is the only opportunity during this meeting for public comment. So if you wish to provide a public comment, now is the opportunity to raise your hand or to make your comment in the Q&A. I would like to also note at this time that Toby Patrick was able to join us. So Toby, if you could let everyone know that you are here. I think we saw you. There you are. Thank you. So I will read that Rachel Overstreet provided a statement to clarify. She's asking for both the GAO report and the congressional report to contain language addressing the issue. Okay, at this time, Mr. Chair, I will turn the meeting over to you to continue with The next agenda items, which the third item on the agenda is the committee response to the GAO. For those who aren't familiar, that GAO stands for the General Accountability Office.
Am I muted? Okay, so members, you were sent an advance copy, a draft of my letter to the GAO in response, basically urging them to reply comprehensively to the questions we had posed and not to narrow the response. Are there any questions, any issues members wish to discuss? I just had one addition.
I was gonna say, I don't have any additions or comments, but I'm not opposed to considering adding additional language to address the DOJ comments, if you think it's appropriate in that letter.
I think so. You can certainly work on that. But we're gonna have to do that really, really quick. Any other comments? So the only additions I had was to the, I don't know, it's referred to as a CC list, but I believe CC used to stand for carbon copy, which we no longer do. But adding the names of Senator Murkowski and Representative-elect Adelita, sorry if I pronounced incorrectly, Grijalva, Grijalva, to the list of copied persons on this letter. Any comments?
I had a question.
Yes, Monica.
I thought the list that had, I guess my question is, the list of people who get the report to Congress, which included the people you just mentioned, do they also get the letter for the General Accounting Office, the GAO, or do they not?
We can certainly provide them with it, but the initial draft was to the people listed.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other comments, Mike? Toby?
Not here. This is Mike.
Was Toby on?
I see Toby. I didn't hear him though.
Yeah, I didn't either. Melanie, didn't you say Toby joined? Just wanted to make sure he was good with the language.
Oh, Toby, we are not able to hear you. I can see you're trying to speak to us. Give Toby a minute to see if he can.
Okay.
Okay, I will, Toby, I'm not sure what we can do to assist you with the microphone issue.
Yeah, and the chat's not on, yeah, so. Toby, if you're okay with it, can you just press raise hand?
Okay, I see him nodding.
Oh, you can say, give us a thumbs up.
I'm sorry, Toby, that I have no options here.
Can we move on to report to Congress and then circle back to this? Because I would like to get a motion to approve it, but that would be, I would have to work on those changes before we can entertain such a motion. So the committee can see the final draft.
Okay, you can certainly move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the report to Congress for fiscal year 2025.
Okay, so members, you've seen the drafts. Thank you to all of those who worked on the subcommittee. A lot of work went into that. Thank you to Dr. McEwen. Thank you to Dominique Devobian and others who poured a lot of time into gathering details, especially the museum information. I have 1, 2, 3. I have 3 amendments on the report for our members to consider. Before I get into those, does anyone have any comments with the report in general? Okay, I'm gonna read my amendments. First one, last paragraph on page 3, starting quote, the 91st meeting, that sentence, strike the phrase quote for number hours, unquote. Revise second and third line to read, considered and approved its FY 2025 report to Congress. Considered and approved comments to be submitted to the GAO. That's amendment 1. Second, add a bullet to the end of the list at the top of page 17. Quote, yeah, this is information that just came to us yesterday. The New Bedford Whaling Museum, which on September 24th, 2024, held the remains of no Native American individuals, spent $93,067.92 on NAGPRA compliance in fiscal year 2025. This expenditure represents a 63% increase over fiscal year 2024, unquote. And then I would like to add the following footnote. NAGPRA Tableau 2024, Melanie Botvin, Personnel Communication, dated September 29th, 2025. And then the next amendment, first sentence in the first full paragraph on page 17. Quote, the 12 reporting museums spent a total of over $6 million on NAGPRA compliance in fiscal year 2025. The average increase in the expenditures from FY 2023 to 2024 was 49%, and the average increase from FY 2024 to 2025 was 50%, unquote. Are there any comments or discussion about any of those 1, 2, 3, 3 amendments?
Please repeat the name of the museum that's being added?
Yes. The New Bedford Whaling Museum in New Bedford, Massachusetts.
Thank you.
Okay, members, any discussion on the report or the amendments that I just read into the record? Monica?
The last one you mentioned, I'm sorry, I was trying to get to the page that you were talking. You said at the top, the first full paragraph on page 17.
Page 17.
Which on mine is the 11 reporting museums, right?
Okay, hold on, let me pull up my draft.
Do you mind just repeating what you said that you were changing?
Hold on. Well, pull out, I won't go to that page. Okay, so page 17. We're changing the word 11 because we're adding the
Yes. I just wanted to make sure that was where it was.
New Bedford,
Thank you.
yeah, so that becomes 12. And then everything stays the same until the last, where it says was another 49%, that 49 changes to 50.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm where I was looking.
Yep. Okay, members, any comments? Discussion? Last chance. Okay, I'm looking for a motion that we establish. Oh wait. I guess we approve our report first. I'm looking for a motion to approve our FY 2025 report, subject to the amendments I just read.
I motion.
So moved by Monica. Is there a second?
I'll second. This is Mike.
Second by Mike. Discussion. Having heard none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Toby says aye.
Okay, thank you.
Aye.
Okay, so that's unanimous. Thank you, members. Next, I'm looking for a motion that we establish a subcommittee to begin development of the committee's FY 2026 report to Congress.
So moved.
Moved by Dominique. Is there a second?
Yeah. This is Angela.
Was that you, Monica? Or was that Angela?
No, it was Angela.
Okay. Okay, Monica's head started to move, so I it was coming from her. Okay, moved, seconded by Angela. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Can we ask those who are on from the public, are there volunteers who wish to help serve on this subcommittee?
We can do that in two ways. If people would like to raise their hands to volunteer to participate in the subcommittee for the report to Congress. Alternately, you can send an email to the NAGPRA program at NAGPRA_info at NPS for National Park Service.gov if you are interested in volunteering.
I've got a question.
Okay, good question.
Will our subcommittee members stay the same into FY 26, or do we need to reestablish that?
I imagine because we're establishing a new subcommittee that we would we would need to reestablish that. All in favor? Or did we vote
Aye.
on this already?
I think we did.
Okay, we approved the subcommittee. We got volunteers. We're going to add volunteers. Hold on, give me a minute. Yeah, I believe that's it. Hold on, I moved the community recognition. Was assigning better documents. Okay. Before we go to distribution of the report to Congress, no other comments, okay, are there on the report to Congress? So I want to move on to item 5. No other comments? So Melanie, can we move on to agenda item 5?
Yes, absolutely. The 5th item on the agenda is the National Park Service 2024 Reburial Policy Memo.
Oh, I got it. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. I have one more on the distribution of our report to Congress. Members, amendment. This is what I was looking for. By adding one more name to the distribution list, and that would be Susan Feller, President, CEO, Association of Tribal Archives, Libraries, and Museums. Does that require a motion from us or just an technical addition?
The committee will need to approve the distribution list. I don't think that
Okay.
that has happened.
I'm looking for a motion then to amend the distribution list for our report to Congress FY 2025 by adding Susan Feller, President, CEO of ATOM.
You could move forward with approval with the amendment as one motion, if you'd like.
Okay. Can we move as one motion, the distribution of our report to Congress?
So moved.
Moved by Dominique,
Second by Monica.
second by Monica. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Toby says yes.
Okay,
Aye.
unanimous. And then now, Melanie, the Reburial Policy Memo. Okay, so this was added to the agenda. Dominic, I believe this was your concern?
Yeah, it is. I just wanted to put this on the agenda. This is a memo that we received, I think, late last year. And I wasn't really familiar with it until it came out. Maybe it was posted, I think, in some of the meeting documents at one of the previous meetings. But essentially, it's a waiver process from the Park Service on how to rebury within Park Service lands. And I really just wanted to make sure that people were aware of it because previous policy prohibited reburials within Park Service lands unless the ancestors had been removed specifically from those parks. So this is a process that gives an exception waiver. And that's really kind of it. I don't think we need to review it in detail or anything, but it's just one more option for tribes to rebury on federal lands. Unless the committee has any additional discussion that they'd like to work through.
I have a question. Since that policy was sent last year, is it still in effect?
I believe it is. I haven't heard of anything of it being rescinded or modified in any way. But it went into effect October 7th, 2024. So if you're not familiar, it is posted in the meeting materials. It's definitely worth reading through and working with your Park Service branches if it's something you're interested in pursuing.
Hey folks, this is Brady Blasco at the Solicitor's Office. That memo has not been rescinded. It is still in effect, just to confirm for you.
Perhaps this is something that the subcommittee that will be working on our report to Congress can help develop solutions to any issues that the committee identifies with regard to this particular policy. And then it could be a matter that would be included in the FY 2026 report, a proposed resolution. I think this was just for discussion purposes only. Before we go to item 6, can we circle back to item 3, committee response to GAO? Another option would be that we send a separate letter to address Ms. Rachel Overstreet's concern and proceed with the existing letter. With the additions of the 2 names to the copy list. Members, any discussion on that?
Would that be a separate letter sent directly to the GAO?
Yeah.
Or would, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. To address the specific issue that she had brought up, rather than adding it onto this one.
Okay, thanks.
So the main change to this one would be the addition of the 2 individuals on the copy list.
And then also, since this is a Department of Justice request, is there any provision for our advisory committee to require the Department of Justice provide information, or do we have to go through the GAO? I think I'm asking for clarification on proper procedure, I think.
So I can clarify that for you, Monica. This committee advises the Secretary of the Interior. So the committee can make requests to the Secretary of the Interior to make a request to a different part of the federal government. Or alternately, the committee could include something in its report to Congress in asking Congress to provide some information or to request some information. Those are the 2 avenues this committee has for requesting information.
So it sounds like we need to ask this to be included into the report to Congress. Is that what I'm hearing, Melanie?
That was one of my suggestions, yes.
Okay, I think, is there any further discussion on this? Because I want to move on to the best part of the meeting for me, item 6.
Do you need us to approve the GAO letter before we move on?
We're approving the text only, correct, Melanie? and then I provide the letter.
Yes, if the committee wishes to send a letter to GAO, then the committee needs to vote and agree to the contents of that letter.
Okay. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the contents of the letter as shared previously with the addition of the 2 names to the distribution list.
I move to approve the letter as written with the 2 additions.
Motion by
Second.
Monica. Second by Angela.
Yeah.
Discussion? All those in favor? Say aye.
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 All right. Thank you, Toby.
Toby says aye for the record.
Yeah. His camera came on briefly. Okay, are we good now to move on to item 6, Melanie?
Can't do much when you're in the meeting because
Toby, we can hear you now.
They can hear me.
oh, you can hear.
Yeah, right.
Sweet, it worked.
Okay. I think we can move on. I'm just double checking with Lisa that we have that all moved very fast. But we will work through the transcript to be sure that we got recording there of all the votes and procedures. And so with that, we can move on to the last item on the agenda, which is the election of a chair and vice chair.
Yes, so I believe my term ends either the end of October or the end of this month. And so I would like to move for that we consider a new chairperson, and I nominate Dominique DeBobian, who has served as vice chair during my term, who I could not have done what work I did without her. And she has my full confidence, and I nominate her to serve as the next chair of the NAGPRA Review Committee.
I would second that.
Dominic, you don't get to speak, just listen. Discussion, members.
Well, I will just point out that being chair is voluntary, not compulsory. So Dominique, you can object to the nomination if you wish to.
Thank you, Melanie.
All right. Having heard no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? Somebody mute Dominique's microphone. Okay, then she takes over, yeah, and then votes for the vice chair. I mean, is that how it works?
It can work that way, sure. So we'll need a nomination for a vice chair.
We'll ask for free nominations if anybody is interested in serving in that capacity. Hearing none, I will have to pick somebody to nominate. All right, I nominate Monica Shaw to the vice chair position.
Second.
Oh, I was going to decline, actually. I want to make sure, I mean, I'm happy to serve, but I also want to make sure that I have a perhaps a traditional leader or someone else to help guide our committee. Or someone who's Indigenous. I feel strongly that that should be the case. Mike, Angela, Toby, do any of you feel like serving as vice chair?
I can do this.
Thank you, Angela. I appreciate that.
All right, so Angela is nominated.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Great, thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Holly Aloha.
Thank you.
Hey, that concludes the agenda items for today's meeting. Are there any other issues the committee would like to raise?
Are we interested in having a brief discussion about our next meeting, or should we wait and see, what happens with budget issues and timing?
My preference would be that we wait, and as soon as we're able, we'll solicit dates from the committee members.
Okay, thank you.
Toby?
Yeah, I just like to make a comment. It's just I'm the chairman of our Cultural Resources Committee here at the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla. And it's our chairman said that last time that it was we don't know where we're going from here, because the last time that we had this situation, we were stopped for 4 years. And kind of put on the back burner, kind of like is how he put it. And it's really good that we're having this meeting, and congratulations to Dominique and Angela for stepping up. One side of me wanted to, but I'm in election year, and there's 12 people going for 4 seats. So I don't, it's like, where do I put it? I do have the confidence in myself, but at the same time, I don't know where my people are standing with the way this administration's going, because there's a lot of things that are out of my hand. A lot of the tribal membership's worried about healthcare. They're worried about things, and that's on the other side of where I'm at, and what I'm trying to work on, and that's taking care of our ancestors. So that it kind of puts a strain on all of us as a people, and it's not just us as a people. I mean, all America, we all know the story, but the thing is that it's our ancestors, as the other thing that was stated before, and I believe it was Mike made that comment, was that we've been here before. We've done this before as a people. It don't matter if it's Mike and his people, or Dominique and her people, or me and my people, but we've all been in the situation to where we've had to deal with this one way or another and make it work. And I'm really proud of all of you folks, for doing the jobs that you guys are doing for our ancestors, because that's in our way, is the unwritten law. There's laws that we have as Indian people that aren't written down. It's what we believe in. It's how we believe. And it's how we take care of our ancestors. And I just wanted to say that and put that out there for you folks. And I had my IT come down and check my mic. I was doing everything I possibly could where I could take it. And then I had the IT guy come down, and he done every step I did. But the only step that I didn't do was take out a piece of gum and put it in my mouth, and then the mic came on. I was like, "Are you kidding me? You just took a piece of gum?" And that's how the mic came on. I don't know if that means anything, but I mean, that's what happened. I mean, I was like, I went through everything. I'm sitting here talking, I can't hear you, And then the IT guy shows up and he leans over this way so I could do my thumb thing. And then what he was doing was putting in a piece of gum. And then Melanie said, "I can hear you." So that's what I need. So just kind of a heads up for you folks out there with the way things are going. Just take a piece of gum and see where it brings you, I guess. And everything will work out good. Okay. So I just wanted to share that and tell all you beautiful people wherever you're at to take care of our people, Good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Toby. I'm glad that he had the gum because it was good to hear your voice. Is there anything else that the committee would like to raise or address? Hey, I would like to thank the review committee members, the Department of Interior staff, and all of you who attended today's meeting. We can adjourn the meeting. Holly Aloha, would you like to provide a closing pule?
Sure.
And I will stop the recording and stop the transcription. And then I believe I can stop the recording. Let's see.
Kako, e nā kupuna o Hawaii o kupuna o Amerika. Mai ka manawa o Akea ai a manawa. Hei pune mako